it shows how sick we are as a nation, that we put politics and even our perception of people and a person above it blinds you to everything else. Everything else. Truth doesn't matter. Science doesn't matter. God doesn't matter. I want to hate person. Children don't matter at all. And that's why Sound of Freedom is being attacked right now. Because they don't want to have this conversation about the 85,000 children.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Founder Podcast. Today, we have an extremely special guest. So typically, I'm interviewing entrepreneurs that have incredible exits, whatnot. But this is a subject that I am more passionate about than anything, more than business. Goes right up there with God. And today, we are going to be talking with Mr. Tim Ballard. Welcome to the show, Tim. Tim is the founder of O.U.R. He's written several different books. The guy has gone around the world serving missions, rescuing children from sex trafficking and child labor. It's absolutely incredible what he is doing. You probably heard about his most recent movie that's come out, The Sound of Freedom. I was able to watch it on July 3rd, the day before the official release. It's rocking the box offices, 130 million. You got so many cool things going on, Tim. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Oh, man. And also, I am joined by my co-founder, business partner, Daryl Kelly. Daryl, as you guys know, has been one of my business partners for many, many years. We started business 18 years ago, and I wanted to have him on the show just because it was a special one, being able to hang and spend a little time with you, Tim, jump in. You know, it's interesting. There's not many things that I donate my money to, okay? I donate my money to God, to religion, because I really believe in that. And I've donated my money into saving children from sex trafficking. Those are the only two I've ever donated my money to. So I'm really excited to have you. Dude, tell us a little bit your story. Obviously, if anybody has seen the movie, they know that you were a government, you worked for the government. Kind of dive into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So I spent 12 years as a special agent, undercover operator for the Department of Homeland Security, working almost exclusively child crimes cases. So infiltrating child trafficking networks, infiltrating on a digital, approach, undercover approach, everything. And in 2006, the laws changed in the United States with the passage of a law called the Adam Walsh Child Protect Act. What it did was it allowed U.S. agents to go overseas to find American pedophiles who were abusing children overseas, and we could hold them accountable as if they had committed those crimes on U.S. soil. That changed my world because not only was I just doing kind of the end user, like those possessing child rape material, but now it's let's go find the kids that they're hurting. No one could have predicted what would happen after that, but when you work on a bureaucratic system, see the problem is child trafficking knows no borders and boundaries. Unfortunately, bureaucracy does. And so I ran into a lot of problems where I'd get really deep and then told to come home because I didn't link it quick enough or strong enough back to the US. And you don't just find the Americans right away, right? You could take some time, but you don't care. You don't care what the kid is. I don't care what nationality the kid is. It's a child of God, and it doesn't matter. So I'm committed emotionally and every other way in ways that transcend governments or borders or boundaries. And so the U.S. government didn't mean to, but it was kind of torturous, like, gotta come home. But I made myself the bait, 2013 comes around, and I'm working two cases, one in Haiti, where a little boy who was kidnapped from Haiti, but he was a U.S. citizen. I promised his father when I met him in 2012 that I would never stop until I found his son. We were narrowing in on him, and then I was told, stop, not a U.S. case. U.S. citizen kid, yes, but not a U.S. case. It was Haitian crime, and I'm like, well, geez, then the Haitians aren't doing anything about it. The father is by himself. At the same time, I was consulting in Colombia on a different matter, fighting human trafficking, and that you see that depicted in the film Sound of Freedom.
So let's dive a little bit into so everybody that's jumped into the movie theater the last few weeks, obviously, what is it like? We're hitting 130 million.
I think that's where we're about to approach. Yeah,
wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody knows that story that's seen it, right? And if you haven't seen it, go and see it. It's an incredible message that we need to basically shine the light on these cockroaches, right? Let the world know what's happening so that we can go and fight it. But this other story, and I know this isn't a story that you have told very often, and I actually had the opportunity to hear this story from a good friend of mine, Russell Brunson.
Yeah.
And because he had kind of firsthand experience, let's dive into that experience. So how did this all come about?
So, and we talked offline a little bit. I've never told this story. I've never felt it was appropriate, but I think it is. I think I will tell it. You and I share the same faith, and so we know, we have a little more context here. But it was actually a member. I'm not going to say the name of the person, but it was a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, who's our high leadership, right? In the Catholic Church, that'd be like a cardinal, basically calling you in. Very concerned because there's a little boy who was a member of this congregation of our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
So how did he get a hold of you?
Well, he had called me into his office, maybe the year before, because he had read one of my books.
Oh, really?
And it was called The American Covenant, and the book talks about it talks about basically this idea that the founding fathers understood, and it's backed by the Bible. In fact, the founding fathers quoted out of the Bible more than any other source upon building the nation. That's proven. A guy named Donald Lutz did a whole study on it, and it's overwhelming that the most influential piece of literature that instructed and influenced the founding fathers was the Bible, particularly Deuteronomy, the book that tells you how to build one nation under God. It's also backed by a book that you and I believe in called the Book of Mormon, which it's this concept of a covenant on the land. If you are righteous, you will prosper in the land is a summary of it.
Right.
The founders believed that. They believed that righteousness was key. George Washington said in his first inaugural address that the blessings of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained. That's right out of the Bible. It's right out of the Book of Mormon. It's right out of the Judeo-Christian thinking, which that's how you build one nation under God. So I've written a series of books, in fact, that touch that theme.
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to read the Washington Covenant, or the what's it called? The
Washington Hypothesis. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic book. Yeah, for anybody looking for a good read, it's awesome. Well, so he reads this book. What was it that stuck out about him? That's like, man, I need to have this guy in my office.
He called me in and he said, I want to help you. The nation needs this. And it wasn't about the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, Mormons. It wasn't about that at all. It was about, this is a message that needs to get out to the world, that righteousness does bring forth the blessings of heaven. And if we're losing liberties, if we're going crazy, and it's because we're not turning to God, we're pushing God out, which is something that's this horrific trend that's happened since about the 60s, 70s, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And when you take God out, it gets backfilled by all sorts of crazy things that are now affecting children, right? And see, now here's a part that I didn't. He helped me understand that the world of fighting human trafficking and child trafficking in particular, and this world of the covenant on the land are the same.
Right.
It took me years and actually guidance from this spiritual mentor to help me actually see the same thing. And here's the analogy he gave me. He said, imagine you are as a child rescuer, if that's whatever you want to call me, but that's like standing in the waterfall and bodies are falling and some are alive and some are dead, and you're trying to get as many as you can to resuscitate, and that's great. Someone's got to be there. But at some point, you got to go upstream. Why are the bodies falling in? What kind of wicked culture or system or whatever it is, or bad policies or whatever it is that's allowing this to happen? You better get up there. And once you get up there, what you're going to find is there's only one solution. There's only one solid, effective guardrail that's going to keep kids and others from falling in. It's the covenant on this land. It's what built this nation. It's what built ancient Israel. It's the only thing that can build a solid family and a personal life. And so that's kind of the connecting points. And so he was kind of helping me with that, helping me message it and bringing in really powerful people, like experts in the field, like a guy named Ken Krogh, who he's the founder of Inside Sales. He's now on the board of the Spear Fund, which is something we'll talk about in a second. But so anyway, so he's kind of helping me, with that and just guiding me. And that's when one time, maybe the 11th meeting we were meeting, he said, I want to talk about something else. He said this little boy was kidnapped from our church, from our congregation, and I want you, I want you to go find him. Whatever you can do to find him. I was in the government at the time, so I went. I tried. I tried, but now I tap into the world. This is when I was already in the kind of the frustrating phase of, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. And it's not. I'm not pointing the finger at my bosses. I probably have to say the same thing to myself. Jurisdictional limitations, budgetary problems, continuing resolutions in Congress where that means you don't have a budget because the Congress can't agree on a budget, right? So many obstacles, and we couldn't get these cases done. And I came back to this spiritual mentor, this apostle, and said, I can't do it. This is the same time.
At this time, had you gone down and tried? Had
Oh,
you
yeah.
made some effort?
I had made some effort. I had talked to the father. I had done a whole analysis. I was sending informants with my own money into Haiti. We had identified the location where we thought he was being kept at a false orphanage already. It was killing me. It's like, I got to get in there. I got to get in there. And that's when I lost my authority and funding. At the same time this is happening, and by the way, you can go to PragerU, and they just launched a series on PragerU called Light in the Darkness, which it's an amazing docuseries that tells this whole story. Also, the story is told on a documentary that Russell Brunson executive produced called Operation 2 Saint. It's on Amazon Prime. It's really good, or YouTube for free. So that whole story is there. At the same time this is happening, the Colombia thing is happening. Okay, but we'll save that for people who can watch that. That's the story of Sound of Freedom. So he basically, I came back and I said, the only way I could possibly find this kid, and by the way, any of these kids in Colombia, I'd have to quit my job. And he was very encouraging. He said, "Well, want a blessing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I might need like 12 blessings." and so that's kind of the origin story. I mean, of course, I found newspaper articles about the boy. It had made it to the Utah press because the boy was born in Utah.
Right.
His name is Gardy. So we end up going down, and it's a crazy story. I've written about it in my book, Slave Stealers, and it's in these documentaries. We went down and found the bad guys. They had already sold Gardy. We've not found him yet. I was with his father just 2 days ago in D.C. We're still making efforts. The Spear Fund is picking this one up, and we're going to continue looking for this little boy. We did rescue 28 children out of the false orphanage, and we ended up adopting 2 of those kids. So it's a very personal story, but that the origin really was, that's.
It's interesting. So I heard this same story from a different perspective from Russell Brunson, right? So Russell wasn't involved at the time. You were having these discussions with this certain apostle, right? And he was brought in as a potential to be able to help and fund and be able to go and like catapult this, right? And get it off the ground. And one of the things that he shared with me was just like how much the Spirit of God was involved in this, right? Like just the guidance and even like this particular apostle told you guys, hey, you need to go and do this. And according to Russell, he was like, well, how? And he's like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And just know that God was going to work through you. And I know you shared something off record. I actually would encourage you to share just kind of the words that this particular apostle of encouragement that he gave to you.
Yeah, so it was interesting, right? And yeah, this is the first time I've ever said this out public, but he said that and this is crazy, and I'm gonna, before I say this, I'm gonna tell you Ken Krogh, who's on the board of the Spear Fund. I was in the room when this happened, and this was 11, 12 years ago. And he said, look, Tim, this message about the upstream stuff, that's where the rescues are really going to happen. It's the preventative stuff. It's the thing that heals the nation, right? Again, I'm working on a book about Ronald Reagan. He talked about this. He in fact, his inaugural scripture that he put his hands in was from First Chronicles, I believe. But it says that, if you will turn to me, I will heal your land. These are biblical prophecies, right? And that is the key to saving children, and not just children, but it's like, look, we could all be enslaved. I mean, we live in a country right now where the Constitution is hanging by a thread. Like, look at what state governors are doing, right? Like for example, just look at California. That's where I'm born and raised, right? Like when COVID came in, there's no exception in the Constitution for pandemics. You can't shut down churches. Like literally, the revolutionaries of 1776 fought for a lesser cause
Right.
than that.
Yes.
The king wasn't shutting down their churches.
Amen.
They would have gone double speed.
Right.
Now, only a third, by the way, of the population at that time was actually had the power to do it. 2/3 were like, oh, we're not going to fight this. But they were fighting at the end over a 3% tax on a commodity, not even an income tax. But they weren't being represented.
Right.
And so they didn't feel like you can give them a 3% tax even on just a commodity because they negotiated down to just tea.
Right.
Right. So, and can you imagine what they would have done if the king said, oh, and by the way, smallpox is coming, shut down all your churches. And what did California do? It rolled over. And Gavin Newsom became an emperor. The Constitution, it was built for that moment in history, by the way.
Right.
That moment in history. That's what it's built for.
Oh,
And they all just rolled over.
We're from Washington State. Same thing was happening in Washington State, right? Like Governor Inslee. I mean, him and Newsom are best buddies, right? Like, and we are just sitting over there on Eastern Washington, conservative Eastern Washington, just fighting this one. I mean, it was religion, it was business, it was everything. They took away all of our freedom.
Wow.
Yeah.
State officials?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are all kinds of fines that they were going to put on us. We fought it to the hill because we weren't wearing masks. Everything else.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
So anyway, the point is like this: the Constitution matters. It's a document that God inspired. The founding fathers will tell you that, and so we could all be enslaved. I remember this as apostle once asked me. He said, well, "How are you going to rescue any of these kids in like the rawest form of slavery when we're all slaves?" Like, oh my gosh, because it can't happen that fast. It's happened before that fast, you know. I love looking at the example of North Korea. Yeonmi Park, if you know her, she's a good friend of mine. She's the most famous North Korean defector, and she talks about how when Ronald Reagan said that liberty can be lost it's only one generation away.
Right.
Well, the proof is in the pudding with North Korea. With Korea, right? Post World War II was cut in two. Capitalism and freedom, constitutional type principles. South. It was the same country, same heritage, same DNA, same natural resources, everything the same.
Right.
But they drew an arbitrary line. Capitalism here, socialism, communism here, up north. It didn't even take a generation. Tyranny, freedom. It's that quick. So ideas do matter.
Right.
Policies do matter.
Right.
And they can make you a slave really fast. And it's slavery.
And to your point, I mean, COVID is the perfect example of this. We all experienced it. We all experienced like immediate slavery across the board.
Right.
You know? I mean, sheep doing things that made no sense, double mass, triple mass, eating in outdoor tents. Like, I mean, it was absolutely asinine the way that, that whole thing went down.
So the idea was you got to be a voice for this stuff. Tim, you've written about it. You've proven it through history. And that's what this next book I'm putting out. The first few books are very LDS based,
right?
Because I use a lot of Book of Mormon principles,
right,
and stories along with biblical, which will turn off a ton of people. They won't even look at them, which is fine.
That's fine.
You don't have to. It's all biblical also. And so the new book I'm putting out it's called Ronald Reagan and the Ancient Covenant of Liberty, where it's just biblical. It's Reagan understood. It's interesting. Only 3 presidents that you can really, really nail down invoked this covenant loudly and clearly. They also are the only 3 presidents in American history, maybe with the exception of Eisenhower, but the only 3 presidents in history that literally, through their policies and actions, liberated millions of people. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Ronald Reagan.
Hold on, before we got to finish the story.
I know you're going to get out of there. I'm like, I'm going to get out of it. I'm going to get out of it.
Oh, dude, we got to hear the story. So what did he tell you? That's an awesome question. We will go there.
And it's I'm a little bit shy to say just because it sounds so, people will rip. I don't care. Look, I've been accused of everything over the last month just because of the success of Sound of Freedom.
Right.
I've been called a pedophile, a trafficker, a deep, dark Masonic wizard, all sorts of like on and on and on. So they can use this as well. But But basically, he said, Tim, one of the last issues on the table, and when he said this 10 years ago, we weren't even nearly as divisive as we are today, not even close. But he said one of the very last issues on the table, and I would contend that today I couldn't even say this is true, but back then you could. That everybody, left, right, up, down, I don't care what political, religion, whatever creed or whatever, children shouldn't be raped. Unfortunately, that's not exactly on the table anymore. That's been politicized, and we can get into that. And I think that's one of the reasons Son of Freedom is taking so much flack. Not that people are saying they should be raped, but they're going that direction, and we'll get into that. But and he said that because it's still an issue that everybody can embrace, it is a unifying issue, and I think it is still. It is unifying enough that 130 million people. Or I'm sorry, 10 million people have bought tickets to see Out of Freedom.
Silent majority standing up.
Because it's a silent majority. But he says, then what are you going to do? What's the message? Well, of course, it's continue rescuing kids. But he said, you need to use that platform. And he said this to me, and I'm sorry, like, you guys, everyone can hate me and think I'm dumb and arrogant, because I'm not. I'm just telling you what he said in front of Ken Krogh. And, to me, and this person's a prophet. He has prophetic gifts, which, and I believe that, and I'll take that to my grave that I believe that. But he said to me about 11 years ago, he said, now mind you, like when he said this, my wife and my parents knew my name. That's it. Like, no one knew who I was. He said, you need to be prepared because you are going to be a household name. But for someone to say that to you, just like,
especially from somebody of that stature, that prophetic, you're right.
Like that, you can't predict that because that's like 1 in a billion that you can say that. And he turned to Ken Krogh, and he can be my witness to this. And he said, Ken, you need to help him when it happens. I was so freaked out by it because, again,
that gives me chills.
Because you know who I think he is and who you think he is. Like, that means something, right? If you're Catholic and the cardinal said this to you, you'd be like, wait, what? I freaked out. In fact, I said to him, will you do me a favor if you really believe this? Will you call my wife and call my bishop? like now. Tell them you said that, because greater men than I have fallen far when that happened, if that happened to them. Like some of my biblical heroes, right? And so he did. He called my wife and he told her, and he asked my bishop. He came into his office and he said, "This is what I think, and you just got to be ready." So I got a call from one of his very close family members in the last 2 weeks. He says, "Hey, you remember prophecy?" I'm not kidding you. I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't want to say anything." He's like, "It's happening right now." And I'm like, "Yeah." And again, all you jealous people out there who want to rip on me because you think this is fun. You think it's fun being called a pedophile. My child called my wife in tears, saying that, "Did you and Dad get divorced? I just read in the news that you're divorced, and that Dad has a girlfriend." I mean, this is not fun,
right?
You guys, you love to hate me because you think you want this.
Yeah,
believe me, you don't want this.
You know, it's interesting. Nothing great has ever been accomplished without creating just a divisive, right? It's the unfortunate truth of society. Everybody draws an opinion, one side or the other, of somebody that's going out and doing something. It's either out of jealousy, it's out of, or they support it, right? And and it's just so interesting to see. I mean, we see this happen in entrepreneurship. We see this happening in government. We see this happening in, great causes like you're running on. And so, man, first of all, I applaud you for taking a stand, because I know it's not easy. It's taking hate and having rumors. I actually get a lot of hate about me. I have a divisive personality.
I can tell, yeah.
I take a stand. You're right. Like never, there's never like, where do I sit on this issue? And so, I resonate with that. I resonate with standing up for what you believe in. Everything.
It's so sad, you guys. Like I started my own podcast on a whim like a month ago just to support the film, and I finished episode 3. I get a phone call from Donald Trump's team. "Hey, Donald Trump wants to come on your podcast." Like, what?
Yes.
But so I did. I interviewed him, and we're dropping the podcast today or tomorrow.
Was this when you went and visited him this last week?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I went to Bedminster. He hosted it. Now I want to tell a story that's crazy. That it talks about how crazy this divisiveness is.
Right.
I cannot understand it. Like, I just cannot understand it. But I was called to the White House. The crazy story, like maybe 3 years ago. I think it's 2019, maybe 4 years ago. I can't remember. But I was on the Laura Ingraham show.
Okay.
Which is filmed in Washington, D.C. late. So I'm getting back to my hotel. I get a call from my office. Hey, the White House called. They were watching the show. The president was watching the show. He wants you to come to the White House tomorrow. I'm like, what? My gosh. Like, I'm going to try to clean my suit because I'm going home. I'm okay. So I show up unshaven. Like, I walk into the White House and no one told me that, like, I walk into the West Wing. I think it's just him and I. He wants to talk. No, it's in the cabinet room. The leaders of every anti-trafficking group is. I recognize some of them. Like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And they said, oh, go find your name tag, and sit at the table. And I didn't have a name tag, which I understood because I was invited. Yeah, so I'm just like, I'll be the wallflower. That's cool. I'm here. And the woman comes up, she's like, Mr. Ballard, you got to go sit down. Like, oh, I don't mind, but she's like, no. And she points. And so there's only one chair with no name tag, and it's higher than the other chairs. It's president's chair. And then next to that, I didn't even look there because why would I be there? But there I was right next to the president.
Wow.
So they sit down, and all this is on C-SPAN. You can watch the video. And I sit there, and he just says, okay, Tim, I understand you spent 10 years, and all the press is in the room. So I understand you spent 10 years on the border. Tell us about human trafficking on the border. Now, this is not political.
Right.
This is easy.
Right.
That Clinton built more of the wall than anyone else before or after. I mean, Trump was heading there. It wasn't political. It's a tool to rescue children.
Right.
Because the United States is the number one consumer of child sex in the world. So you don't want to be a lost child in the United States. 85,000 unaccompanied minors showed up in the last 2 years under this administration, and they were let in without any vetting. Just whoever showed. I've said this before, and it's true. It's harder to adopt a cat from a shelter than to go pick up one of these kids.
That's wild.
It's the most.
I heard something you shared just recently. You talked about, like, they come in with a sponsor, like a written down sponsor. Tell us about that. That's crazy.
I mean, these guys are making $14 million a day. The cartels. So the kid comes across. Thousands of these kids, according to CBP data I've seen, are under 5 years old. They come across and there's a name given to them. And it's just like George Smith with the phone number. That's the sponsor. So Health and Human Services, by policy, it's not their fault. They have to do this. They don't like it. In fact, there's a woman from HHS named Miss Rodas, R-O-D-A-S, came as a whistleblower and said, this is crazy. She said, we are trafficking children. Because what happens is there's no vetting, there's no background check.
This is wild.
You pick up the phone, you call the number. Hi, George Smith. Are you the sponsor for Jose Gonzalez? Oh, yeah, I am. All right, we're going to send him to you. What address do you want him sent to? They used to have to come pick them up. Not anymore. Your taxpayer dollars puts them on a train, plane, automobile, sends them, completing the final leg of what is likely a child trafficking experience, right?
And the crazy thing is like 3 or 4 years ago, it was so hard to believe that our government was bad for the average citizen, right? And then over the last 3 years since COVID and everything else, all these things have come out, right? You got like the Hunter Biden stuff, Biden family freaking laundering money. Like it's crazy to think how involved our government is in this. I mean, we are allowing this to happen. We are basically, just as guilty as any of them.
So I'm in the White House explaining, look, you got to enforce the border because it's 2 + 2 = 4. It's like walls force traffickers into ports of entry. I remember Kamala Harris. I testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee when she was a senator, so I know she knows this. But like, I remember she did a post once when she was campaigning against Trump about his vanity project, the wall, and it doesn't do anything. And she actually said this, which scares the heck out of me that she's our border czar. She actually said, we don't need a wall because all the seizures and rescues are happening at the port of entry. You can't, and it's like, are you really not, that's like, really? Is this an intelligence problem? Like, you can't congratulate the port of entry for anything like a rescue or a seizure of drugs without simultaneously congratulating the wall, because guess what? The wall creates the port of entry.
Right.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
Oh.
And it's not as if the traffickers with kids are driving like through an empty space of hundreds of miles and they find 2 posts called the ports of entry, and that's where they're going to take the kids so you can maybe catch them. Like, you need the frickin' wall. So this is why I was so shocked. That's all I'm saying in the briefing in the White House. I leave the White House. And within hours, I get a phone call from my office saying, Tim, we've just lost 1,000 recurring donors that watched you talk to the president. And they said, call them, please tell them that you would have said the same thing to anyone, any president. And it's true. I would have run just as fast to Biden, Clinton, Bush, Trump, equally. I'd say the same thing. And I said, no, I'm not going to call any of them. Are you kidding me? Like, they just broadcast a very important message, which is the plague, I think, of our country right now. That they hate one person more than they love rescuing children from a life of rape. They didn't stop giving money because they thought we weren't rescuing kids. No, because I dared say anything to the president of the United States. And I will say anything to anyone in power. The leader of the free world. Are you kidding me? I don't care what party you are. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what you are. If you're in that position and you have the power to leverage resources to rescue kids, it's incumbent upon me to go ask for help and tell you the truth about what's happening. And so I'm going to take a lot of heat again for interviewing Trump, but I did it, and I'm excited about it's going to air this week, and it's they don't want to have the conversation about how children are being sexualized in the name of sex education. They don't want to have the conversation about what's happening on what I call the trans foist on children, right? Because you understand, pedophiles, I've been hunting them for 2 decades. They put their literature out there, and they're getting bolder and bolder because the leftists in this country, I'm not talking about liberals. Right. Liberals are different than leftists. I respect liberals. Right. We can have a healthy debate with liberals. Yep. Leftists, wokeists, okay, whatever you call them, that's different. That's what pedophiles are looking at them going, I like you.
Thank you.
You're doing our job for us. We've been trying to sexualize kids. We've been trying to get kids to have the power to consent. If you look at the pedophile literature that's been out for decades, kids should vote. Kids should have, well, why? Well, because we want them to consent to sex. Right. They won't say that part out loud, but that's what they're trying. Kids should consent, but you got to sexualize them first. And that's what our sex ed and TikTok and everything else is. By 13 years old, our kids are sex addicts. And now you're telling them, hey, sweetie, you are brave and bold and you can consent to gender mutilation on yourself. Well, if you can consent to that, it's only one more inch to consent to having sex with a 50-year-old pedophile. And that's why the pedophiles are salivating. And now in your state and in the state of Oregon, parents can lose their kids if they don't gender affirm.
It's
and the pedophiles are salivating and applauding because for the first time in the history of America, we are doing the job that the pedophiles have been begging us to do. And that's the conversation that these guys don't want to have. When the operation went down in October of 2014, that's depicted in the film. It's all filmed. There's a documentary coming out about it. The Guardian, Rolling Stone, MSNBC, CNN, all of them applauded it. They reported on it. I was on CNN. I was on MSNBC. Good job. We all agree this is bad. The story didn't change 10 years later. But the same outlets are now saying, bad story, QAnon story, Tim's a Masonic wizard and crazy. And they want to discredit Sound of Freedom because they don't want to have the conversation regarding what I just talked about. They don't want to talk about what's happening to kids because it'll hurt their agenda. Right. And that's why they're doing this.
So let's talk about, because clearly, the promotion of the sexualization of and education of children early on is leading to these policy changes which will allow it. But like, what are the core things that lead? Like, how can we help teach our children, raise our children right, where they don't end up in that shoes, right? Not only children, protecting our children now, but as adults, what are some of the core things?
So there's two avenues, because I've been hunting these people for a long time. There's two avenues. One is more tragic than the other, and even sad for the pedophile. But if you're sexually abused as a child, your chances increase significantly when you hit puberty yourself and start thinking about sex. Your neural pathways have already told you that sex is with adult and a child, so they'll repeat what happened to them. It's horrifying and sad. In fact, the guy in the film Bachman, who's bringing the kid across the border, that was the case with him. He's still in jail. He was sexually assaulted.
This is the guy that you met up with in the restaurant.
No.
Oh, the guy that actually
drove the van.
Got it. Yeah.
So the other one is sex addiction, which comes from porn use, right? So what happens? The brain responds to pornography just like the brain responds to marijuana or any drug. It's not even the naked pictures or the substance you're putting in your body. It's the dopamine release. It's the endorphins. Your brain releases chemicals, and that's what you want. And porn does it. But if you smoke marijuana every day, 10 times a day, right, eventually the chemical reaction is going to get weaker and weaker. So that's why they elevate to stronger things. Same happens in the porn world. You can only look at porn so much, the legal stuff, the adult stuff, before it's like, dang, I'm not getting the hit. So they go to something crazy, like some weird fetishes or your bestiality, and they usually end with children. And they'll start looking for 17, 16, barely legal, then 15, then 13, then all of a sudden they're traveling to some high trafficking area to look for a child. So you have to combat the demand, and a big part of that is educating kids. And again, this counters what these people are doing, and it counters what the pedophiles want. They're fighting this. Sexualized. Kids deserve to know. Look at the books they're giving kids right now. Third graders. Right. Teaching them about every sexual position, this whole thing, like this.
In our state, they're actually starting in first grade.
My gosh.
It's crazy.
Like a child's brain can't handle that because their brains are little sponges, and you're teaching them to want sex. And not to be raw, but I just am, but like some of these, they're also teaching them in some cases to go masturbate so they can have a feeling associated with the pictures. So by the time they're 12 and 13 and told you can consent to anything, like you have groomed them to the max, and they're ready to go. And the pedophiles are like, this is awesome. And there's more pedophiles than you think, by the way. If there's 2 million children, and that's according to State Department and others, 2 million children forced into commercial sex, what kind of demand justifies that number? More than 2 million. There's more pedophiles than people want to even imagine. And they're sitting back going, this is kind of cool. Pretty soon the day will come when it's going to be cool to just, the kid's going to say, hey, Mom, not only am I in the wrong body, but I'm also the wrong age. I mean, what's more fluid? Like I adopted 2 kids from Haiti. Like I knew that one was a boy and one was a girl. It's pretty easy to tell. I didn't know how old they were. Age is more fluid.
Right.
So if you can make the argument that you're in the wrong body, you sure as hell can make the same argument that I'm the wrong age. And when Mom and Dad come and say, no, sweetie, no, you're not 50 because that man wants to have sex with you and I can't. That's a bridge too far. Sorry, Mom. You already threw out virtue, God, science. You threw it all out to get clicks because you let your kid gender mutilate, right? And you're a hero, and now you can't stop them. It's too late. The laws have codified around this perverse idea that children can consent. My 13-year-old can't consent to do what they want to do on a Friday night. You think I'm going to let them put poison in their body or chemicals that hurt their reproduction? I mean, it's insane, right? And so when these kids who are now sexualized, thanks to our sex ed programs and TikTok and social media that parents aren't controlling, it's too late. They lost the argument. It's a trap, and the trap's set. And Mom and Dad aren't going to be able to stop it. And if they do try to stop it, thank you, state governments of Washington and Oregon, and they're going to take your kids from you.
So most people that hear this are just like mortified, right? Like my wife absolutely hates the whole thing that's going on. It doesn't make sense to her. But you're saying it's moving upstream, right? So how do we move upstream? How do we get the covenant established, or what does that look like to you? How do you see that play out?
Well, I just turned to history because they did the same thing. You look at the situation George Washington or Abraham Lincoln were in, right? Like there's nothing more dire than what they were facing. Like it'd be like China and Russia invading our beaches. That was Washington's reality, and Lincoln watching to the tune of hundreds of thousands killing each other, right? So that was pretty dire, and the Lord humbled them so deeply during that time of trial that they turned to God. And the answer was the same both times. Turn the people back to me. Turn them back to me. And once you do that, you start seeing miracles. My books are about this, right? Then the miracles on the battlefield of the revolution, the miracles on the battlefield in the Civil War. And then people start recognizing, okay, God is real. And then they start coming back to God. Because what happened was in the 60s when we started pushing God out and misinterpreted the Constitution, the First Amendment, to say that there's this separation. It's a separation to protect people from any one denomination becoming empowered, not a separation of God from the people or God from the government. Not at all. I mean, the very people who wrote the Constitution were invoking God, right? So it's an oxymoron to say that they didn't understand what they were doing. But when you pushed God out, darkness backfilled it with this crap, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's being backfilled with sex education, foist, this trans foist on kids, kids. That it had to backfill something, and so we've got to clean that out and bring God back in. And then once people start seeing, and this is according to history, once they start seeing the miracles, they start believing more, and the more they believe, the covenant is activated, and the more blessings of liberty, protection, and prosperity start to come back in. And you don't have to believe my words; just believe Lincoln, believe Washington. They said it, they saw it, they witnessed, and they said it. And like my books are all about that, right? I mean, you read the Washington Hypothesis,
Right.
I mean, you can read Thomas Fleming's book on Washington. It's this thick, and he mentions God like once or twice, and makes Washington maybe we don't know. And you read my book; it's all primary sources. I mean, is there any question who Washington was?
Right.
I mean, it's crazy how they can change or edit things out of history. Like Washington believed in God and intervening God. He invoked it. He talked. I mean, it's all right there, and that's we need to follow that pattern again.
So, question for you. So, you're involved, or used to be involved in like the front lines of this work, right? Like going in, obviously you got to get to a very dark place, right? You're associating with these pedophiles, associating with these traffickers, these guys that are just terrible human beings, drugs, alcohol, sex. I mean, everything that you can think of. How do you handle those dark moments? Like, how do you use your foundation, Christ, your foundation of family? Because obviously you're a family man. How many kids?
9.
9 kids. Father of 9, right? You see these as beautiful angels. Like, walk me through that.
Well, it's a constant struggle. My therapist tells me I probably need a whole year or more to really heal my brain because I'm done undercover now. But I went as long as I could.
How many years?
About 15 years, which is probably 10 years too many in this theme at least. Because you got to pretend to be anything and everything, and yeah, it burns holes in your brain, and then you see images of children, and
How do you purge that?
that's what I'm working on right now. Because the first 10 years or so, I thought I was fine. I didn't get help because your brain naturally compartmentalizes.
I mean, so like walk me through like during those first 10 years, like what would you do? Like what were some like practices or whatnot to like come back like, okay, to recenter?
I mean, everything to me was always very much faith, and, I go to our temple. That's a cleansing place, meditation, prayer. After a lot of ops, I'll just try to go somewhere. Like I'll stay an extra day before I even see my family. But then I'll have a breakdown. I'll have different things. The brain's a complex thing. It's not supposed to see some things, right? It's not designed to see these things, but someone's got to see them, right? And so, I mean, I've had moments of full breakdown, like wake up in a parking lot, like what just happened, and that's when I started realizing I got to get some help. Like in fact, in 2020, fall of 2020, I had that happen to me. I was about to go on an operation. Something triggered. I also have OCD, which is a blessing and a curse depending how you use it, right? And for sure, PTSD. And I had this whole break, and it was a cool story. I mean, it hurt like heck, but I woke up and I was in Florida, and all I can think of was Tony Robbins and Sage, who are my good friends. And I just texted Sage. I'm like, 911. I'm in Florida. I didn't even know I was there. I don't remember what happened. I ended up in their house that night. They brought me in at like 1 a.m, stayed up with me all night, and just kind of ministered to me and prayed with me, and that began a whole journey of healing for me that happened between 2020 and now. And then now that I'm out of undercover work, the healing continues. But for me, the foundation is Jesus. The foundation is the cleansing power of His grace and atonement, and that's what I'm still just learning to use better.
So if I'm hearing you right, I mean, really the solution to everything is invoking the covenant, which is turn to God, reestablish families here in the United States, realize what this is all about, quit relying so much on science, literature, and everything else, but become a righteous people again.
That's right.
Which will ultimately cleanse.
It sounds so simple. It's like looking at Moses' staff. It sounds so simple, but history proves the model. And it's funny because these people, these kind of godless folks who are pushing this other agenda, That's why I don't. They're going to not believe me. But here, can I introduce you to a woman named Harriet Tubman? You want to talk trash on her? I dare you, because she taught this same thing. I mean, all the people she rescued, because God told her to turn left and turn right, and she'll tell you that in her own words. I mean, they're fighting. They're all pissed off because I guess Trump might have stopped the process of her becoming the person on the $20 bill, which I'm in favor. She should be on the 20. She's my hero, but you got to fight her if you want to fight the covenant. So that's how you have to fight, because I have no credibility with these people that need to be converted. They'll throw me under the bus. They're doing it right now. But I'm just going to introduce you to Abraham Lincoln and Harriet Tubman and Harriet Beecher Stowe and George Washington. And Ronald Reagan. Let me introduce you to these people. Fight them.
That's awesome. So I know a lot of my friends that have seen the movie. They're like, now what? Right? Like, I saw the movie. I'm aware of what's going on. Maybe I've donated to the cause. I bought somebody a movie ticket so they can see it, or whatever it is, right? Like, that's kind of the message that's been putting. But the next question is like, how can a regular old person help in the cause, help fight it, help either fight it upstream or downstream? How can we be involved?
So there's a new thing. I'm an initiative that I'm a part of. I'm not an executive, because I've vowed never to. I can't be an executive because of the elevated profile. I'll never be an executive of a nonprofit again.
Yeah,
you're so vulnerable. You're so exposed. People think they can come after you just because you're a part of a nonprofit. So I'm consulting. I'm as an independent person, but I'm consulting heavily with one group called the Spear Fund. Ken Krogh, who I mentioned earlier, he's on the board there. And what the Spear Fund is, it's a scalable approach. It's a new approach. One of the problems we see in the nonprofit world is the scarcity mentality, where every institution wants everything for themselves, right? And if you're being very honest, which we all need to be, and look at it through the eyes of a child who's in some corner of the earth and in hell, you want the best rescuer to go to that child, right? And the best rescuer is not going to be any one organization, as great as they are. But there is an organization that is the best for that child. Well, I'm in a unique position to tell you which one that is. No donor could find it, but I can find it. I know these organizations, and they're ready to deploy. They're already on the ground. We funded an organization recently that they were the only group in this corner of the earth that could have rescued a handful of kids. I had never heard of them before. Their budget was small. Their marketing was pretty bad, but they got the funding and they rescued the kids. I couldn't have done it. And so that's what the Spear Fund does. It's not a rescue organization. It's a unifying and basically it taps into the beautiful benefits of capitalism,
yes,
which you don't see happen very often in the nonprofit world, which is if you're the best, you're going to get the funding. And we hope to harness this greatness, this great kind of goodwill and all this positivity coming out of Sound of Freedom. We expect these coffers to be full, big time. It's already happening. And why is that good? Because I want people to compete. Well, get better then. If you want to get better, this is capitalism. Be better and you're going to get the funding, right? And I'm only doing it for the kids because I want the kids to have better. And so I'm really excited about the Spear Fund because it's, like I said, very scalable. We could run the top 10 rescue operations on the planet in 1 week. I couldn't do that with this in being in one org, but I can because it's the 10 best organizations all working in the same week in different areas, and we're funding all of them.
When you started O.U.R, or back when you were called to start this and leave the FBI, was there this much activity? It seems like it's
no, and that's the point. Is I couldn't have even done this model. One, I didn't have credibility in the space. No one knew who I was, so they wouldn't have, and I didn't know who they were if they existed. But over the last 10 years, so many organizations have popped up around the world, and some of them are very mom and pop in one little country. But they're the best for that kid. And so now that I know who they are, right? And now that they're prepared, it's really fun. Because they're shocked. I call them, wait, why are you giving me money, O.U.R guy? Like, you're supposed to not want to give, you know what I mean? Like they think I'm just representing everybody. So
right. I love the concept of being able to delegate where the funds go, because to your point, right? Like it would be like relying on different governments to deploy funds properly, right? There's probably some governments that are efficient and other ones you're just like, they were efficient, but then they become inefficient and you no longer want all funds to go there or whatnot. So I totally resonate because that's the very capitalistic model. Like reward the winner, reward the person that's bringing the most value from the dollar.
And you know what else you're going to love is people who are listening to this who are business folks, right? Is the the ratio of overhead to project is phenomenal over here. Why? Because we're not funding the overhead of these orgs,
Right.
and the overhead at Spear is very limited. Like right now, it's I think probably nothing. Like the people that are working and as the executives are working for free. Eventually, I think they
Right.
should get paid, but that's for them to decide. But the point is, when the grant money comes in, we're not sending money to cover someone's overhead. You better be good enough to at least have covered that.
Right.
It's going right to mission.
Love
Right to mission. So you know where your dollar is going. It's going right to, and I'll make sure it goes right to mission. So that's.
I really love that, man. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview is I don't monetize my podcast, right? So I'm I'm top 25 business podcasts in the world, and we don't drive the traffic anywhere. I don't sell them any product, don't do anything. But I've wanted to get a cause that I could push my following to, and I'm really excited. I want to put together something with you, in which we can drive our people, because this is a cause I right, like the turning people to God, fighting human trafficking, saving our children. God's children are not for sale. I love that message, by the way. And so I'm really excited to formulate that. One thing I'll do, we'll have a link put together to be able to donate to the Spear Fund.
awesome. Thank you.
And we'll put that in the comments, and I'll start adding into my additional podcasts and whatnot. So, but really excited for just everything that stands for. Like I said, I'm a capitalist. I want the most return for my dollar, and in this regard, return is saving. Right. And I think,
Right.
I think that's anybody's concern around donating to a charity, right? Is that what is this dollar actually like? If I donate $1, is only a penny getting to the bottom, right? Because that I've heard crazy statistics around like the Red Cross and everything else. And so like, I'm a big believer in you, big fan of you, and I know, like, I just love your story, love everything you're about. Like, I can get behind that. So I'm super stoked about that. And just kind of imparting words, like, what is the message that you want to share with the world?
I want people to know that this is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And just because you haven't heard that before doesn't mean it's not true. There's been a lot of effort to hide it, even innocent effort of I don't want to look at this. It's hard for even honest media to talk about it because they're just like, this sucks. I'd rather not know this is happening. But it is happening, and it's happening at rates higher than we've ever seen. And I'm very concerned. I was with Speaker McCarthy 2 days ago. He hosted a screening, and then committed to a bill to go find the 85,000 kids who disappeared. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, because look, this is really happening. Sound of Freedom is the first time that I've seen it go far and wide. Like, people are waking up. And so I would just ask people, like, help us. Help us deploy. There's brave men and women willing to go into the darkest places on the planet. We just need the light to give to them so they can take it into the dark. We need resources. We need prayers. We need, support. So please, like, people, everybody, go to the spearfund.org. Help us. Donate. Right now, we need resources.
I love it. We appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. Thanks again. Until next time.